Okay, so I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker, Chuck. Chuck is a senior manager of product engineering at Comcast. What's interesting about Chuck's profile is, and also about his talk, is that it's a lot around humans. And Chuck is very involved in the community to help the humans. And it's going to be an interesting talk because his talk is about career development and yeah, I think that's something that everyone struggles with. And actually last year, for those of you who were here last year, or not here, but at our event, one of the highest ratings actually was the talk about burnout and around sort of the human aspect of DevOps. So we're excited to have Chuck here because he's adding an element of that as well, and he's a fellow community builder. So thank you very much for being here, and take it away.
All right, thank you, Julia. Good morning still, everyone, almost afternoon. I'm really excited to be here at DevOps Days Montreal. My name is Chuck Mountz. I'm a senior manager at Comcast, and I am based out of Reston, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., and our headquarters are in Philadelphia, so they're not too far away from me. I'm really passionate about people. I'm really passionate about engineers and their career development, and that's why I'm here today to talk to you about creating a personal North Star, taking ownership of your career path. Oh. There we go. So a little bit about myself. My clicker isn't working to start with. I lead a shared services team at Comcast. And so what my team does is we build sort of like the back-end services, and we help support some of our network engineering platforms. My team runs a managed Kafka service. We help with automation tooling like Terraform and Ansible. And we help people onboard onto a Prometheus metrics and monitoring as a service platform. We have some of my peer teams also have databases that they have services for as well, like Cassandra, Couchbase, Mongo, and so we've pushed towards no licensing and open source databases. And we also have a team that manages platform analytics, so they do like Elk, Splunk, and Hadoop. So some of the teams that we support in the product verticals and the network and internet services space include our Xfinity voice products, our Xfinity Wi-Fi products. So when you get a cable modem from Comcast, it typically has a Wi-Fi hotspot. They also have commercial hotspots and in different arenas and so forth. Some of the B2B services, commercial services, we help support as well, and our email services. I'm also the co-founder and co-lead for our Comcast internal DevOps events. We just finished completing our 5th year of running those events at Comcast. And I actually got the idea coming to Canada back in 2014, going to the first DevOps Day at Canada. And so we've brought that back to Comcast. We run those internal events in 3 locations where I'm based in Reston, Virginia, also in Philadelphia and Denver. And this year we expanded with some really great executive support to Seattle. And next year, we're looking to go expand even further, potentially with our partners at DreamWorks in Los Angeles, and maybe even with our new partner, Sky, in the UK. And as you may have heard from the introduction and what I'm talking about today, I'm really passionate about people, human beings, and leadership. So today, we're going to cover engagement and fulfillment at work, and why it's important for you and the organization to focus on your career development. Take an introspective look at ourselves and better understand our values and strengths. Create a future vision of your career. Build out career action plans. And engage and have meaningful conversations. So a lot of the thought process around this approach came from a book called Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go. So it's a pretty direct title, which is, talks a lot about career development, obviously. So what they do is they talk about hindsight, right? And that's kind of taking a look back at your past and the things that you're passionate about and understanding, your values and strengths. And then they look at foresight, So that's trying to take a look at the vision of where you see yourself down the road in your career. And that helps us find the insight into how to move forward with a career development plan. So this is Astrid. So if any of you have seen the How to Train Your Dragons movies, you'll know that she is a very fierce Viking. And also for the intent of today's story, she's a great software developer. And we're going to follow her career path later on in the talk. So engagement and fulfillment at work. Why is this really important for you to focus on? So there's a cost associated to disengaged people. And so in the US alone, not last year, but in the US typically there's upwards of cost to organizations of upwards of $600 billion for disengaged employees. So it's a really big problem. That comes down to about 34% of each person's salary. So it's really important to work on things you love to work on. So employees who are engaged typically are more productive. They are, typically the organizations have a little bit more profitability, better customer satisfaction, less turnover, better quality. And typically, like with the turnover, the cost there is around roughly an employee's salary for the year. So the one thing I want to mention too with engagement is that the first item on the last slide talked about productivity. For me, engagement is more about being happy in the workplace, being who you are, and living those values and strengths that you have. That will lead to productivity. It's not just about productivity in and of itself. When we talk about career paths, one of the things that we've been discussing lately is having a little bit of a mindset flip and having an open mindset towards how we're thinking about the future and where we want to go. And that's kind of more around experiences, right? So typically when we talked about the career path, a lot of times we talked about promotions. And so we talked about getting to the next role. I know I've been in career conversations with engineers and myself, and it's really hard to not think about it from that perspective. But we want to think about different experiences, right? And so this is a climbing wall. And so it's a good analogy here. So to get to the top, because we all do want to progress in our future, sometimes you have to move laterally. And so there's so many different roles and opportunities now than there were even 5, 10, 15 years ago in technology. There's a lot of different experiences that we can pursue. One last thing about this talk before we get into kind of the meat of the discussion here, empowerment versus emancipation. And so there's a great quote from a book that David Marquet wrote called Turn the Ship Around. And he talks about the differences between empowerment and emancipation. In empowerment, he likes to talk about how that the leaders don't have the power to give to the employees. The employees have this general, they have the intelligence, they have the genius, and oftentimes the leaders only have the power to prevent that from coming through. I think it's fair to say that a lot of us has been through some sort of not so great conversations around our career where we haven't maybe thought about this. So hopefully the information in this talk will help you be emancipated from some of those broken processes. So let's talk about how to better understand ourselves and what those strengths and values are. So one question to think about and ask yourself is, if someone asked you to tell them about your life, what would you talk about? And so there's a lot of different things that you could talk about. You could talk about your career. You could talk about the different activities that you like to do, different hobbies that you like to do. You could talk about your schooling. And so there's a lot of things that you could explore, and you want to feel safe in talking about those things. But in this particular situation, you're just sort of jotting those notes down yourself. And then what you want to do is think about why you made some of those decisions, right? Why did you move from one job to another? Well, what particularly excited you about a different activity or a hobby that you had interest in? So identify a handful of those events, maybe 4 to 5 different events, and think about some values and strengths that you can associate with those events. And I can just tell you a quick example for me. It is referencing back to that DevOps days I went to in Toronto. Before that, I didn't really have any experience with putting together events or really know much about DevOps in general. And since then, I think it's safe to say that I could describe that event and write it down and say that I'm really interested in collaboration and community building, and list those as a strength and value. So the outcome you want to have is a list of key moments and associated values and strength from this particular exercise. So a vision of your career. So this goes back to one of the previous slides where I talked about those experiences and not necessarily the titles. So some questions to ask yourself: where do you see yourself at the pinnacle of your career? When you go into the office and you're at the pinnacle of your career, what are you doing? If you could work on anything without any time constraints, what would that be? What industry excites you? A good example is, if you don't believe in nuclear power, don't get a job in nuclear power. So, when you get out of bed every day, what is your motivation and your passion? So we'll talk just a little bit about Astrid here. And she's interested in engineering leadership. And so she's not interested in a specific title per se, but she's interested in maybe going into that specific path. And the other thing to think about, so now you have identified maybe a potential path or experience that you want to go down. Think about some skills and write down 3 or 4 skills that you think are necessary to help you get to that next job. Right, so here's a couple of skills that might help Astrid go into engineering leadership. Now think about what's the order that you might need to focus on, right, for those skills, because this will help you sort of think about your action items down the road. And so if she's moving into an engineering leadership role, maybe she's going to be responsible for people, so maybe she's going to prioritize that first. Business and product might be a good idea. She's probably going to get a lot of questions from leaders about how their product is working. Process, she'll probably get some good questions about when we're going to deliver some of those products, and the technology. And these may change over time, right? As Astrid builds up her skill set, maybe in the business side, maybe there's some changes in technology where she needs to bump up those skill sets as well. Multiple experiences and roles that you're thinking about doing is okay. That all kind of changes with us. And I know that's changed with me over time as well. I definitely didn't have the same role experience that I was trying to get to 10 years ago than where I'm at today. You want to focus on your strengths versus weaknesses. So what we're trying to do is really focus you and better. So now we know that you have these values and strengths, right? And those are the things that we want to incrementally improve on and build upon and get you into a role where you're doing those things that you're passionate about. Working on things that are weaknesses kind of depends, right? If it's like a blind spot, like a significant gap of something, you might want to touch up on that a little bit so that it's mitigate any kind of career risk there. But otherwise, you want to focus on doing what you're great at. So the outcome, you want to have your career vision and a prioritized list of skills to help you get there. So action plans. So there's 3 places where you can focus on your action plans. And a lot of times we used to think about some of the action plans basically around skills and training. And that was kind of more of a short-term focus, like I'm going to learn how to code something to deliver a product this year. And one thing I didn't mention earlier is that this sort of career development plan is more of a long-term focus. This is like 18 to 24 months out and something that you kind of continuously work on. So your network is a great place to start building out some action plans. Your role is a fantastic place to start or to work in as well. And then, of course, skills and trainings. So some ideas around networking. So seeking out a mentor or being a mentor, and same thing for a coach. Kind of depends on what you want to do. And build your own advisory board. And so kind of think of it as your own board of directors. I know in the past that I've met several people and I can connect with different people about various topics. Like I have someone I can go to talk about process. I have someone I can go to talk about leadership ideas. Some people I can talk to about technology. Connect at conferences. So you're here at DevOps Days Montreal. This is a great place to connect to people to connect around, food, connect around the open spaces. They're terrific. I saw a number of hands go up around open spaces. That was the one thing that blew me away at DevOps Days Toronto, was the collaboration at these kind of events and the people that I got to meet. Connect at local meetups, open source initiatives, tear down those silos at work, start connecting with different people on different teams, like the dev and ops paradigm. In your current role, so you can seek out different projects and assignments, right? So if you're trying to learn how to code something, and this is where you can sort of look at your backlog and see if there's an opportunity maybe to enhance some automation, pick up a different language, and you can run with that and get it done. Job shadowing and job rotation, depending on kind of the size of your company and different programs they have. I know at Comcast we have a great program called Summer of Code, where you can apply to a host team. Well, someone applies to be a host, and people apply to be a part of the program. And so what you do is you host an engineer for a summer. They get to rotate with your team for 2 to 3 months, and you get to learn about the culture of that team. You get to learn some different technologies. Inter-source projects. Get out and do some talks and presentations. They don't have to be something super formal, but they could just be demos. It could be brown bag sessions. We set up our demos, and I have it on another slide as well, because there's a little bit of overlap in some of these action items. But we set up these demos to be learning sessions. And so we do them every week. We do them, I stress that they should not be completed work, and they should not necessarily be polished presentations. The purpose of that is to create a learning session, and it's better to get feedback on what you're building before you get it completed as well. Pair programming, swarming is another great way to connect with people. So skills and training, I think we're very familiar with some of these. There's classroom training, there's online training, again, brown bag sessions, demos. We talked a little bit on the job, hackathons, open source projects, personal projects as well, and that's something that I've seen personally, where people take some of the skills that they're building, with some of their hobby work in the evenings, and try to incorporate those technologies into the things that we do. So you want to have 1 to 3 items per those categories: networking, role, and skills. Don't want to overwhelm yourself. And so we're going to talk about, so now we have all this information, right? We've talked about how to understand our values and strengths. We've talked about how to put together our vision of where we want to go. We've talked about some ways to sort of organize action items. And so we're going to talk a little bit about Astrid now, right? So she's compiled this information. So let's take a look at what that's going to look like, and how she can prepare for how to collect that information, and also how to have some conversations. So here's one of Astrid's values. So back in college, Astrid worked at a coffee shop. Unfortunately, she had a manager sometimes that wasn't present all the time. She showed a lot of initiative and leadership. And so she helped make sure everything ran smoothly and functioned despite some of those concerns. Compassionate. Astrid helped out with her aging grandparents. And so she went to go see them, helped them run errands. She also helped them with appointments and spent some time with them. Collaboration and initiative. During college, she was obviously very busy. She was also running hackathons, connecting with some local businesses for projects. And she's carried that into her career with her as well. So collaboration and innovation are a big part of who she is. So here's her vision. It's engineering leadership. So here's some action items that she put together. So networking. She's going to seek out a mentor who transitioned from engineer to manager within her company, and then she might seek out an external mentor at a conference as well. And then she's thinking about connecting with a product owner, right, to maybe learn a little bit more about the business and products that her organization, her team has been working on. So on the skills side, she found a book, and it talks about transitioning from an individual contributor role to a leadership role. She's going to take a look into that. There's some leadership training courses that are available at her company, and so she's going to note down that that's a possibility of something she might want to pursue. And then she's talked to her manager about this a little bit, so she's thinking about doing some one-on-ones with junior engineers on her team, and maybe looking at some self-assessments as well. So in her role, she's going to try to carry that peer-to-peer conversations, specifically to work on how to give feedback to people and actually how to ask for feedback as well. And she's going to sign up for a mentoring program at her organization to be a formal mentor to some junior engineers. And so we talked about the priorities that she was going to set around these skills, right? So people and business and product were at the top, right? So what she's going to do, she's going to look at this list, and it's a lot of stuff to do. She doesn't want to overload herself, right? So she's going to look at these peer-to-peer discussions. She's definitely going to work on that. She's going to seek out a mentor. She's going to definitely pull that into what she wants to do. She's definitely going to try to take a look at that book, learn more about this, if this is the right thing. And then she's going to connect with the product owner, right? So she's going to start trying to figure out a way to shore up her business and product information. So now she has all this information, and she's starting to, we need to put it all together, and then she's prepared to have these kind of conversations. So what does she have? We'll summarize this a little bit here. So she has a list of strengths and values. She has a list of potential future roles. She has a list of opportunities and action items. Now she has an opportunity for partnership to go out and talk to people and get feedback. So who could that be with? It could be her manager. It could be her manager's manager. It could be a coach. It could be friends or family. And there's a great way to track this. Do a lot of people here like spreadsheets a lot? Let me see a raise of hands. No? Just a couple? Okay. I've tried spreadsheets. I've tried Word documents. They work okay. But there's, I think, a really easy approach to do this. I just created a Trello board. And so this is a public Trello board. You should be able to search for it. If you can't, you can find me throughout the rest of the conference, and I can help you get connected to it. So I just put together this board for Astrid. And you can see on the left, we talked about her values and strengths, her vision, and prioritize her skills. It doesn't take more than a few minutes to put a Trello board together. And then on the right, you can see the to-do column, and those are what I highlighted in the last slide, right? And so then she can just organize those from top to bottom. And so now, anytime she's trying to have a conversation with people, she can articulate it. She has these things captured and documented, and she can visualize it too. So I saw this phrase last year at a culture summit, and I talked about how companies, like what they're doing in response to people moving around from one organization to another. And they talked about maximizing employee lifetime value. Like we all know we're not going to work in the same place for 20 or 30 years. It's just not the reality today. So I want to flip that for this conversation and encourage you all to maximize your organization's opportunities and learnings. Take advantage of training programs, take advantage of development programs as much as you can. So your North Star is your guide. Astrid now has a North Star. She kind of knows where she wants to go. She can articulate that pretty well. As a result of this process, you should know yourself a little bit better. You should feel like you should spend time and invest in yourself. In times of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, this North Star will help guide you, right? You might get derailed depending upon what's happening in your professional life, but you have that path charted out, and so you know what that is, and you can quickly get back on that path. And be authentic. And a lot of people throw this word around, but really it's living and breathing and doing what your strengths and values are. Be yourself. So Astrid knows someone called Hiccup, who is her partner, and he was authentic. And so he didn't try to be who his father wanted him to be, and he ended up being the leader of the Vikings and connecting with the dragons, and he was himself, his own leader. Here's some additional resources. I also used a little bit of information from Radical Candor as well. And if you look at both of those books, you can kind of see where the Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go book sort of influenced some of the processes they put into the Radical Candor book. I highly recommend them. They're fantastic books for communications and development. A little bit of information about Comcast in the community. So you may see us at some of the different conferences. We're sponsors for DevOps Days DC and DevOps Days Philadelphia. We've had some speakers recently at the DevOps Enterprise Summit this year in Las Vegas and London. And Comcast is sponsoring a TechStars program here in Montreal in January. So I'll try to share that link. Hopefully these slides will be shared. We'll figure out a way to get that out to you. And lastly, one last thing, be happy at work. Thank you.
Chuck, something from Montreal to remember us by.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Are there any questions? Come on. Yep, there's a question. Cool.
Thanks for this talk.
Yeah.
I have two questions. The first is about what are your thoughts about building an advisory board that are outside your company? So having like a mentor or someone to refer to that's outside your company, and how do you maintain this level of communication with them?
Yeah, so I've actually been involved in some mentoring programs with an external organization called Women in Cable Television. This year I'm a mentor in the program, but before I was a mentee in the program several years ago. And I was actually partnered with someone who worked at Time Warner Cable, one of our competitors who we tried to buy, and you know, it is what it is, right? So, it was a program that was sort of a part of that industry community, but yeah, we met like probably once a month, and actually I've been able to connect with people at conferences who are external as well. Yeah, sometimes it's not formalized and it's maybe not as frequent because that's kind of an actual program where you want to keep track of progress and those conversations. But some of the other mentorships I've had, maybe once or twice a year to connect with people just to get some different ideas and feedback. So yeah, it's worked out really well.
All right, thanks. And my second question, in the spirit of DevOps, do you have any recommendations for metrics to collect and see how you develop in your career, and if there's a particular kind of like benchmark to compare against and see to evaluate yourself after your action plan? How are things improved?
So yeah, that's really great. So we have employee surveys, and so I like to have more detailed employee surveys. We have one once a year, and so it gets into training and development. And so the engagement scores help us better understand, if we're on track with those conversations, and then some of the more detailed questions help us understand, where we can improve these conversations and opportunities to develop people. Yeah.
Anyone else? You guys are all on a solid career path. I like it.
Thank you. So how do you get people on board with the idea of making them grow their own life if you meet them months after months and they're happy in where they are? So there's any tips or things you've done in the past to make them involve more, or the process you're doing kind of gets them on board?
Yeah. So I originally started this journey around career development probably 2 years ago, and I started working with the team that I had before the one I'm on now, and then I transitioned to a new team. And one of the first things I did with that new team was I started having career conversations with them. And so in the book Radical Candor, they talk about that helps build trust within the teams. So they got engaged with this thing, pretty quickly. And we make it a part of sort of our monthly discussions. Like we have one-on-ones more frequently than once a month, but some of those discussions at least once a month, and we talk about how they're progressing with their career development plan. And to be honest, I've had difficult conversations. This is why I got on this journey. I've just asked people, where do you want to go with your career? And I've had that question asked to me, and I'm just like, I don't know. Can you give me some time, right? So those questions, and there's many more, like in the Help Them Grow, Watch Them Go book, that helped me connect with people better to think about what they want to do. They're the only ones that know, right? Like I can't tell them what they should be doing, right? So, yeah.
Did you have those
Wait.
career? Did you have those career conversation with the whole team or just one-on-ones?
No, one-on-ones.
One-on-ones. Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the books you mentioned, would that be something that would be good for helping a developer actually decide what he wants to have as a career plan, or?
Absolutely. Yeah, and all the conversations I have primarily are around the technical route and what they want to try to do. And so we look at different experiences. Those programs, Summer of Code, like I've hosted people that wanted to come to my team that they were actually going from manager to engineer. They tried the manager route. And so they knew that like for them to be successful, to go reintegrate back into the engineering path, they wanted to learn more automation and tooling, right? So my team was doing a ton of Ansible and Terraform. So they came and that's what they did for 3 months. And then we had career conversations about what they wanted to do, so.
I have a question. There's another question over there. Do you have any tips on how to deal with some of the more taboo subjects like pay increases or things like career advancement when the team is sort of limited, or I don't know, anything that kind of comes up as like hard or awkward?
Yeah, those are really hard conversations, right? Because some of those things aren't necessarily directly in our control, right? So we try to be within the framework of what the organization is doing, as open about what's happening there. And so I think a lot of organizations, they want to try to be more transparent about some of those things. And that's always a tough thing to work on. So, and that's honestly why we're trying to frame it around an experience perspective. And so trying to create more opportunities, I think opens that mindset to thinking about more possibilities and what they can do. And I think, I kind of feel this way personally, but if you're doing the things that you're really great at and you can connect with, that part of a business value that you're connecting with, that will sort of take care of itself over time.
Do we have,
Also probably having the conversations in the first place.
Yeah.
we have one really quick question over here. Also.
Okay.
Hi. How do you interact with a junior that might not have a sense of direction? Do you encourage them towards something that you think they might be better suited for, or do you give them the chance to try and figure it out themselves?
Try to give them a chance to figure it out themselves. So I'll just kind of, like I had some of those questions I have up on the screen, I have more questions. And so I'll just keep going through the questions and trying to just get them to think about more. And it's not going to magically happen in one conversation too, right? So we're always talking about it. And then I feel like also my job, as a leader is, like some of those programs I talked about, is to try to connect them to different opportunities, to different people in the organization who are, like if they're interested in doing a certain type of programming or picking up a different tool, that here's someone that you can talk to learn more about that. So.
Question over here.
Okay, we have two here, so you can go first, and then we'll, come to you.
So in today's market, there is a requirement to have multiple different skill sets. So when you see like the job market, they ask you to know about Git, databases, and many things, right? So
Right.
What advice would you give to someone that actually would like to advance, like focus on one and then move to the other one, or how would that be, right? Because there's multiple skill sets that are required nowadays.
Yeah, and to be frank, I've had feedback, and it's tough, right? I don't know if you all feel that, but there are a lot of skill sets, and I don't know if it feels like there's so much that you feel like you have to learn. There's a really good book by Daniel Pink called Drive, and he talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So I think it's a really good idea to try to, like if someone wants to improve their database skill sets, to give them a long run at trying to do that, right? Like, don't try to go from week to week and start to create, then you're sort of like getting into that like unplanned or context switching, around, really big things, right? It can be confusing for them. So yeah, try to give them like a project that's sustained for a long time. Let them build a mastery around that, build a comfort around that, and then see how they want to progress and maybe pick up some different tooling. So, and some of that comes with experience too. So.
Okay, I think we have one last question here.
You were talking about some actually managers that's made the path backwards to, not backwards, sorry,
Yeah.
to engineering.
Yeah.
I'm myself currently in the same path, right, and on the networking environment especially. Do you have any success stories about those paths? Anything that you saw, some things that those people did to help them going like back to the engineering path,
Yeah.
more on automation and all that? Are there any certifications that you recommend, especially on networking? I know that I think you have like a networking background, so maybe you know about stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily have any knowledge around like specific, things to learn. Although, so what I will say that there was a talk given by John Riviello at the Lead Dev conference a couple of years ago. He's a distinguished engineer at Comcast, and he gave a talk specifically on engineer to manager and back to engineer, right? So he went into the leadership ranks, and then he's still a distinguished engineer. I think more than anything, I think he had the support of the organization to sort of help make that a success. And I think he also stayed very current and relevant in his technical skill set as well. And that's going to vary, right, between each sort of practice and what background each engineer has. So I would highly encourage checking out that video. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chuck. Round of applause.